Over 2 years ago, I made a video about some reports that Microsoft was going to give the Xbox One native supports for games to utilize a mouse and keyboard. We're now at the point where it looks like that this is officially going ahead. Crazy, I know, since I actually had to check when I released the last video on it, and it was way back in 2015. I guess these things do move slowly. At that time it was just a rumour, but usually rumours are based around some kind of truth, and I think it's something that Microsoft have been tempted by for quite a while now. But let's just take a step back for a second and look at the facts. Right now, if you wanted to use a mouse and keyboard on Xbox, you could, but it's not really that simple. You can already hook up a USB keyboard to your Xbox and use it for some limited official functions like sending chat messages or perhaps typing in a Twitch chat. Those sort of things where a keyboard is undoubtedly better, but that isn't the issue here. The issue is if you can use them in games, and more specifically multiplayer games against people who are using a controller. The answer is yes. You can already do that, but not officially. There are pieces of hardware on the market, such as the Zim. The Zim is a small piece of kit that doesn't give you native keyboard and mouse support, but instead converts your mouse and keyboard inputs into a equivalent controller input, so that the console basically still thinks that you're using a controller. Now this brings with it some complications. It works pretty well sometimes, but not always, and this is hugely dependent on the game and how the game handles the inputs, especially mouse input. Some games, particularly Frostbite engine games like Battlefield and Star Wars Battlefront, work really well with the Zim, but other games can give you less impressive results, and it often requires a lot of setup and tinkering to get it to a manageable state. Now I don't think anyone would disagree that some games are just easier with a mouse and keyboard, just like some games are easier with a controller. If I wanted to play a fighting game or perhaps a racing game, then I'd opt for a controller 100%. But if I wanted to play a first-person shooter, then I'd much rather have the accuracy of a mouse. Here is the kicker though. Up until now, Microsoft haven't given official keyboard and mouse support, but nor have they stopped third-party hardware from giving players the ability to use it. Microsoft actually have the capability to block those peripherals if they choose to, but up until now, they haven't. On PlayStation 4 though, I think there's a couple of games that natively support mouse and keyboard. Fortnite, for example, is one of them. But for Xbox, an announcement recently has shown us that that might well change very soon, especially if they bring out their own mouse and keyboard that they want people to buy. Originally, Microsoft said that they don't want to block the use of keyboard and mouse because they want their developers to have the freedom to develop their games how they see fit, and keyboard and mice can be useful for players who have a certain accessibility issue or requirement. Now though, thanks to documents that have surfaced online, it would seem that Microsoft are partnering with Razer to release a keyboard and mouse designed specifically for the Xbox One, and that could be an absolute game changer. Right now, the unofficial keyboard and mouse usage on a Zim, let's say, has been fairly limited, and that's because players are doing that with a third-party piece of hardware. Imagine though if every player had the ability to use a mouse and keyboard on the game they were playing and it had actual support for those peripherals instead of it just mimicking a gamepad, so you would imagine that the mouse is going to feel good. Now, unfortunately, this brings with it a whole host of problems and talking points. If I'm playing Halo on Xbox using a controller, why would I want to play against someone in that same game using a mouse and keyboard? One of the benefits of console gaming on the surface is that it seems you're playing an even playing field, and you don't have to worry about someone having a hardware advantage over you, and cheating is incredibly rare. That being said, of course, there are plenty of Xbox controllers and PlayStation controllers that provide improved functionality, from SCUF controllers or even now the pretty standard Xbox Elite controller that has the paddles on the back. It's kind of been going down a custom route for some time now, so it seems that this is just the next logical step, I guess, in that direction. The idea though, apparently, is that developers would still have the freedom to add in mouse and keyboard support for their games if they wanted to, and they could lock out the support for it if they felt it just wasn't going to be balanced for their game. Further to that, the stipulations from Microsoft seem to be that all games will still have full gamepad functionality, so you can't have a game designed with only keyboard and mouse in mind. It still needs to be a home console after all. All USB mice that are supported by Windows 10 should be supported by Xbox One, but if your mouse and keyboard needs a specific driver, then it's probably not going to work. We briefly mentioned this earlier, but developers will be able to lock out peripherals that unfairly mimic gamepad inputs with the help of a new API. But if this does go through the pipeline and become a reality, Xbox and Razer partner and start selling official mouse and keyboard with support for games, does this mean that we'll see multiplayer games have a player base split? Say for instance the new Call of Duty launched and it offered up certain playlists for gamepad users or certain playlists for mouse and keyboard, or maybe the matchmaker could tell what you were using and would try to put you in the same lobby as people using the same gear. I think the console market was always going down this route, but it seems that a lot of players aren't too happy about it, and I can understand their concerns and frustrations. And the main concerns really are going to have to be looked at if this is real, and it's going to have to be by the game developers, because it's ultimately them that will have the last say on what works best for their game. If an FPS game releases and it just allows gamepad users to play against mouse and keyboard players with no restrictions, or no way for the gamepad user to object, then I don't think that's fair. A lot of console players play console for a few reasons. One, it's mostly cheaper than buying an expensive PC and hardware. And two, the fact that for the most part, excluding some of the examples that we gave earlier, it's a level playing field. That being said, I imagine a lot of players love the idea of using a mouse and keyboard on a console because some people just prefer that and it's what they're used to, but maybe they don't have funds to pay for a top-end PC. So an Xbox with a mouse and keyboard would be something that they'd definitely be interested in, and I'm sure that Xbox would be interested in the money from the sales too. Not all players though will have the space for a mouse and keyboard though. A lot of console gamers just load up their favourite game from the comfort of their sofa, and some of the more hardcore competitive console players will still sit at a desk with their console and instead of using a TV, use a proper low ms PC screen with a faster display. Add a mouse and keyboard to the mix and you have to say there's going to be a big advantage to be gained, and a big split between the skill gap. Now we did mention Fortnite earlier, that's doing native mouse and keyboard support already on the PS4, and Fortnite is one of those games that's dabbled in cross-platform play with Xbox players being able to play against PC players, but they have to opt into it. If they're playing on their own, then they're going to be just put up against Xbox players and not playing against people on PC. But I think that this is more of a way to let friends play together, knowing that they're going to be at a small disadvantage, which I think is a bit different. Now this whole scenario, mouse and keyboard on console, officially supported by Xbox, if it's true, it's going to be something that will be very interesting to keep an eye on, as the report suggests it could release this fall, but even when it releases, it's down to the developers again to prove that they can get this working without ruining the balance of the multiplayer experience across the board, and how they choose to do that and implement this or not choose to do it will determine how well received this turns out to be. I don't think that they've got an easy time on their hands because players will always seek to gain an advantage, it's just in our nature. If there are gains to be had without hacking or cheating, then gamers will take them. Tell someone who is much better with a mouse and keyboard that they can play on console on their favourite shooter but be more accurate and have an advantage over the opposition, then they're probably going to take it. I think that's just the facts of the matter. So that's all for today guys. Do let me know what your opinion is of this down in the comments below. I think we could have an interesting debate here. And do you think that Microsoft and Razer will actually go ahead with this? If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.